Hello, everyone. Welcome to Decoding Quirks. I'm your host, Aditi, and today we have a really special guest who is also from the mental health field. She has worked for 4 years and built a brand called Unfix Your Feelings, which to me is really quirky and fun. She has also been, her philosophy is that our emotions are a compass which directs us to the area of our life that requires attention or change. And this philosophy made her earn her master's from New York University. And today we have Anandita. Hi,
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
thank you so much for taking the time to show up and be here and discuss and decode. Before we get into all of that, I'm so curious about your name, the brand name. I've always found my brand name really like quirky and fun. So I've always been curious when other people have like fun brand names. So tell us a little bit about Unfix. How did it start? Why this name?
So it actually started as a very basic idea that after I graduated, I learned about how all the ways people try to find a fix to their feelings, right? And this is through Netflix, through eating food. Like when we're feeling sad or anxious, I mean, Indian mentality, right? Our parents always tell us to go eat something, right? So that's the quick fix that we get, and then that later turns into Netflix addiction. Scrolling is an addiction. Anything, we'll do anything to escape our feelings or fix our feelings, right? Let's find a solution to this. Whereas sometimes the solution is in sitting with it and understanding it, and the only way out of it is through it.
Hmm.
And the more and more we teach ourselves that we need to escape it, the more we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to deal with that feeling until we fully heal ourselves. So that's where the name Unfix came from. And I'm sure your the decoding name sounds a bit similar along the same line. So I'm sure there's some synchrony there.
Absolutely. You're not wrong. Decoding also very often comes from let's figure out where the struggle came from and work backwards. But when you said, right, sit with it, it's it's really hard to sit with it because I think this is something we tell all our clients all the time. This is something that my therapist has told me. I am telling my clients, and I'm sure you tell your
Of course,
clients.
of course.
And it's so much more easier said than done. So, how does one really actually sit with it?
So yeah, I agree. It's the most challenging thing to sit with it. But if you look at, even if you just Google an emotional graph, it'll show you that emotions peak,
Hmm.
okay, and then they fall. But in order for it to you to experience that fall, you have to get through the peak. If you escape the peak, it won't fall. That's just the science of how emotions work, right?
That's true.
So knowing that is very reassuring that it will pass, right? If you sit
Hmm.
in it, it will pass. I think the second thing is language is one of the most powerful tools we have. So what I try to do with my clients is I give them an emotional wheel and we look
Hmm.
through it, identify the feeling,
Hmm.
identify where you're feeling it in your body, because every emotion has its manifestation in your body. So do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your stomach? And then just breathing, tightening that part and releasing that part, naming
Hmm.
the emotion, analyzing your self talk, because it's not the emotion, it's also what you tell yourself about it.
Hmm.
So it's analyzing the self talk to do that, and that's what helps you. But I will say, like any other skill, it needs a lot of building. So you cannot just say, I'm having a bad day, breathing isn't working, but you need to keep it in your toolkit, right? I mean, you don't take vitamin C when you have a cold. You take it building up to using it so that when you have a cold, it'll fight off infection. So, in the
That
same way, we need to keep breathing in our toolkit so that we can then use it during these times.
Yeah, that makes sense. You build up to it, you become an expert at it, and then use it when you really need to use it.
Absolutely.
Um, Even breathing, like, forget breathing, it's even like analyzing what we're feeling. Even starting from there, being aware of our feelings, that itself is so alien to so many of us. I mean, even I think we struggle at it on a
100%.
daily basis.
Yeah,
It's not
I
like
know I do.
we're not constantly like, what am I constantly feeling? How
Yeah,
am I
yeah.
constantly
You wouldn't be
healing?
able to survive if you were constantly aware, also. That's not how our bodies built.
Exactly. So even as healers or even as someone in the mental health field, we're not constantly healing. You don't need to until, as you said, right? The emotions is our compass. It will show us and direct us what we need to do. Um, So the graph that you were talking about, the way it seems like in my head, the way I look at it is like it's a door. So it's the same door that allows sadness to come in, and usually we shut that door because we don't want to feel
Yeah,
sad and we don't want to feel pain. But if we don't open that door and feel the sadness, then we can't feel the happiness that
I
follows
agree.
after that.
I
So in my
agree.
head, it's like a door. You have to feel the sadness, you have to accept it, you have to let it pass, so that now when the happiness comes, it's going to be great. And you feel it at that depth. Usually we just keep it ajar, so we feel little
Little bit.
sadness, but then we also feel very little
Yeah,
happiness.
yeah, I
We don't
agree.
really completely
You
deal
can't
with.
selectively numb. It's not when you put anesthesia to it, it's going to numb every part of your body, right? Not just your finger.
Yeah, I know. I actually wanted to start with something else, but this anesthesia part, um, I truly believe that the pandemic was like it ruined all our painkillers.
100%.
And what I mean by ruined all our painkillers is the Netflix, the binge eating, the parties, the distractions, the traveling. All our painkillers died during the pandemic. And maybe around that time, the only thing we had was work, which we were some of us were concentrating on. But then eventually you had to sit with the feeling, you had to sit with the problem. And that feeling could be like the person sleeping on your bed, or that
Yeah.
problem could be the person in your house, or, the long distance relationship, or whatever you had to deal. And that's where that Pandora's box opened. And everyone, I think, from that time understood more about mental health. Right?
100%.
I'm sure you also experienced some change.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of course, everything kind of became 10 times, so you
Mm.
couldn't ignore it. And you were forced to sit with it, right? But there was also this sort of perfectionist tendency people had to go about the pandemic, which I realized, which is that we either have to work out and be really, really fit and or make these really fancy recipes and this glorified idea of what to do. So of course I tried not to err on that side where I have to present this perfect image, because let's face it, collective trauma that we're going through, and we need to deal with it in the
Yeah.
best way we can at that point in time, right? But I agree, a lot of awareness was raised around me. There are family members that I have who finally agreed to go to therapy, agreed that, and older family members, right, who would never even talk about their emotions, were like, okay, this is getting really bad. And I think one thing that it, if there was anything that it helped with, is reducing the stigma around mental health, because
Mm.
suddenly there's teletherapy available, right? And this opened a whole new world, especially for older people who are not okay to speak about it to their husbands. I think this gave them a chance to say, okay, well, I could just be speaking on the phone to someone. It's that easy, right?
Yeah.
To do. So I feel like in some ways it was also helpful, and it was a, in the mental health space, in some ways it worsened our symptoms, but in some ways that awareness of what was already there was way more heightened, so that hey, you have to deal with it now. There's no way out. And you're right, all the painkillers were killed.
Yeah, exactly. I actually have seen, as you said, a lot of people going into therapy, especially from the older generation. Um, but I also think for them, it was mainly they wanted something that was like a group, or not very doctor patient like behavior.
Yeah.
They wanted talk therapy, but that didn't really feel like therapy, is what I had come across. And I think they did get a little bit of help. But now that's been what, 4 years since the pandemic? Yeah,
For
4 years
wow,
ish,
just
three
feels like
years.
yesterday and feels like
I'm
there's so many popping over all over again.
exactly. I feel like those 2 years also were like
And
lost
lost,
somewhere.
yeah.
But like, do you feel like people have again started using painkillers? And in this way, um, when I say painkillers, we often use addictions as painkillers. So, with alcohol, we obviously know that alcohol is bad. So when someone is an alcoholic, we know that you can't be doing this to kill your pain. You have to feel your feelings. But even through the pandemic and now, people are very obsessed with work. But work gives you money, work gives you success. But overdoing work is also a problem.
100%.
But somehow, working too much is not immediately identified as, oh, you're a workaholic and this is a problem and you are numbing. So since the pandemic, have we gone back to a different addiction? Are we changing our addictions? And is workaholism an addiction?
I think I'll answer that question in two parts. Have we gone back? I think it depends on the person you're speaking to. But for the most part, once you see something, you cannot unsee it, is what I believe. So you'll always know inside of you that I have seen that version of me. And I can't just pretend like it doesn't exist,
Hmm.
right? So then it's about either I face it or then it's going to come out in some way, and eventually you're going to realize that something's up. I think to answer your second part of the question, I think workaholism is a big, big addiction. And it is, again, a way to fix your feelings. So, of course, in some studies, we see that work can be helpful in providing a sense of purpose. It can help you, right? If you go through the grief of losing a loved one, for example, work can start to provide you with a purpose beyond that in your life, right? It can give you a sense of feeling empowered, like you're contributing to society, like you're building your own in some way. But at the same time, it's the level of
Hmm.
work and when you use it. So again, it's avoiding sitting with it sometimes and running to my computer and checking that email and being slightly aware that this is becoming a problem, but then also being aware that this is something that's so glorified in my culture, where not working is seen as lazy and working is seen as hardworking. So I'd rather be on the hardworking side.
Yeah.
Another thing is, unlike human relationships, right, and unlike the human mind, unlike emotions, work is more structured and
Hmm.
predictable. So you feel like you can always depend on it, right? So people really turn to it as a way of, this is how I can cope with life.
Like control,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
They
it's
want a
having a sense
sense
of
of
control.
control. Um, yeah, because once they feel pain, and if they feel pain, they turn towards work to feel satisfied, to feel that validation in other areas where they don't get it.
Yeah,
Right. And then that continues saying that, oh, but at least this is giving me something.
yeah, yeah.
But at some point, they don't realize that they're running away from the problem, and it is ruining probably the work life
The
aspect.
balance,
Yeah.
right? So I always tell my clients, right, it's like it's this life is a garden and the different plants in it. So there's like work, there's social life, there's personal life, there's hobbies,
Hmm.
right, there's exercise, there's sleep. And see, you can't overwater one plant,
Yeah.
it's gonna die.
Yeah.
Neither can you underwater the other plants. So of course it's never perfect and we have different priorities at different points in time, but for the most part we want to make sure that all those plants are an equal height and they are watered equally.
Yeah.
What also starts to happen is then it's like all my eggs in one basket, and there's going to be a lot of pressure if you're just focusing on work. The longer you stare at a clock, the slower it moves, right? So the longer I work and not getting a promotion, why am I not getting a promotion? Why am I not getting it? So there's a lot of burnout because of it as well.
Hmm.
I think the problem there is it's so stigmatized and it's not spoken about as much, right? We just as a society even got comfortable talking about substance abuse.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just about there.
Yeah, we're not completely
We're not
there.
even there
We
yet.
won't say that, oh, my cousin is in rehab,
Is
or
in rehab.
no, we
Yeah,
won't
no
say
one
that.
says that. So with workaholism, you can imagine it's like four times worse because it's not even recognized. We don't have diagnostic criteria for it as clinicians, and there's no structured plan to follow. And of course, the stigma is so much because working is good. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it.
And people don't know how to, as you said, recognize it. And even if you in your family recognize that somebody has it, you're not going to be able to convince them,
Yeah,
because this is how, because somewhere the family reaps the benefit of having a
absolutely.
workaholic person in the family, right? So it's like the byproducts are being enjoyed. So how do you even like approach someone and tell them that they are a workaholic? It's really hard.
It's challenging. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of denial, like with everything, right?
With any
With
abuse.
any abuse, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of denial, and it's a cycle
Yeah, that's
where
true.
I feel anxious, I go to work, right, then I feel less anxious. But then over time, I also feel more anxious because now all my eggs are in one basket. Now I might work harder to get past that anxiety. So it's like a cycle that is very tough to break out of. But I think it's just being more open about talking about this hustle culture that we've built, right? And being more okay with taking breaks and seeing breaks as a sign of productivity as well.
Hmm.
You can always take a break that feels, it can, breaks can be productive, is what I keep telling my clients, is that a holiday can be productive. And I try to role model that as a clinician. So when I take time off, I used to feel really ashamed of it. And now I just tell my clients that, hey, I'm going to be off for this point in time because I too need that break.
Yeah.
So it's a way of role modeling that it's okay
Yeah,
to take that break.
100%. You need a holiday, you need to rest. And something that I've also always practiced is that maybe I'll work through the weekend and it's okay. And maybe I worked like 10 days straight and it's okay. But I don't need the other weekend to come for me to get my rest. If I want to rest on a Wednesday, I'm going to
100%.
take it. So know your body, know your feelings. And it's not a holiday, it's literally a rest day. Whenever I look at it from that narrative of this is a rest day, it makes me want to rest
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not be productive in the other aspects of my life,
Yeah.
like, the housework and stuff like that. Just, it's a rest day.
Yeah. The way I like to see it is not a
Um,
cheat day, it's a treat day.
yeah,
So just changing that narrative in your
narrative.
mind a little bit. And yeah, I think even if you want to take a break on a weekday and if you're working a job that doesn't let you do that, uh, if it's possible, trying at least one day at work where you're doing other things like that are not as stressful
Like
from your
lighter
job,
work.
like lighter work,
Yeah,
right? So for example, for me, if I've had a lot of heavy clients and then there's that one day that is lighter, then I try to focus on creating content or researching a little bit. So that's still work in some form, but it's also rest.
yeah,
So it's about finding the right balance for you.
that's true. And like, as you mentioned about the hustle culture, this hustle culture is something that we hear. I think every other reel on Instagram is
Is on hustle
yeah,
culture.
yeah, is
Yeah.
showing you something about like the hustle culture or how you should hustle or how you shouldn't hustle. So many opinions about it. Having said that, we are falling prey to this narrative again. And now, as I'm a millennial kid, so as a millennial kid, we get into the world. We've gotten our education because that was the main focus that time, to be as educated as you can. You gotten your education, you've gotten your job, you've been told this is the way, this is the right path to life, to success, whatever success means at that point. And then you start, and then you're just like, somewhere, maybe this feels right, maybe this doesn't feel right, I don't know. But there's also this, do I deserve it? Because there are so many people out there, and especially as a woman, there are so many people out there who are more educated than me, who have hustled more than me. How did I get it? Do I even deserve it? Are women even supposed to be in this place? So, you start to like self question and self doubt. And that also leads to so many mental health conditions. So, it's really hard, especially with women, right? So, have you faced something?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's like imposter syndrome is growing so much. And if you go back to, where it all started, it started in, I think, 1979. And it was recognized in women,
Hmm.
specifically women of color. But that's how the phenomenon was termed, right? Imposter syndrome. That's where it came from. And I think it's because the expectations that women have in society are just, the expectations are a lot, right? And we are constantly internalizing this narrative that we can't have it all, we can't do it all, you're not good at this, you're not good at that. We're always told that women will be good at the softer skills but not the
Hmm.
other skills. So the workforce is very competitive then also, because women then tend to be only in certain fields that require those softer skills,
Like being a secretary.
like being a secretary,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not saying, of course, that helping, I mean, I'm myself a helper, so I understand that, but a lot more women in the helping profession, right, as well, because it uses the softer skills. And I think that it's not that we have the softer skills, I think we've just been forced to build it,
Hmm.
because men are told to internalize their emotions, whereas it's okay for us to talk about it and deal with it. And since we found ways to deal with it, we then are better at teaching others how to deal with it,
Oh my God.
right? So it's a cycle in some ways. But yes, of course, women face more imposter syndrome because there's so much that society tells us about not being good enough.
Yeah. I feel like women a lot of women are forced to believe that they're not good enough because it's a way of control also, right? The easier you control them, they don't like surpass men. And from whatever we have seen, men like to be the dominant one, they
Yeah.
like to be the one in control. Women are groomed to be submissive,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So when you tell a girl that she's not good enough, and she's not supposed to be doing this, it it brings up a lot of stress where she doesn't believe in herself, and there's a lot of like self esteem that lacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I have seen imposter syndrome mainly in women. I have in men as well. But in women, it's everywhere from the time that she's a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the time that she's a teenager, it's like body image issues. It
Yeah.
starts with your body image issues that, maybe I'm not as pretty enough. Maybe I'm not as qualified enough. Why did I do well in class? Why did I do well in school? I don't feel as good as my grades are.
Yeah.
So when you feel so unqualified, you just feel like people around you are going to sniff it out and you are the fraud. And it starts from such a young age,
100%.
from being a teenager. And like how do people like work through that, like from teenaging to like, I would say, midlife?
I agree. It affects all ages. I think, especially with teenagers, what I've seen is it happens because teenagers are very, very conscious about their self image.
Mm.
That's this developmental stage in life where you're already very conscious of what are people thinking. Of course, welcome social media, and then there's this whole area of self comparisons that start to build that
Mm.
make you think that you're not good enough. I think in midlife it's more about especially as women, right, as we hit midlife, and some of us have had children, and then you kind of go into thinking that have I achieved enough in my life, right? um I think there's just so many responsibilities. The more
Yeah.
responsibilities, the more the chance of not, because you can't be good at everything. It's
Yeah.
impossible. I can't be a good, perfect at everything. I think this whole idea of imposter syndrome comes from perfectionism. That's
Correct.
what at all life stages binds it together. Is that one common thread is perfectionism. So I have to be good, but at everything I have to be perfect.
Yeah. And with perfectionism, now why does perfectionism come, right? When we decode and understand that, perfectionism also comes because if everyone can be, say, if we're from like a 1 to 100, a lot of people can be at 70, 80.
100%. Yeah.
But if I am at 100, that means I stand out. My name will be out
Yeah.
there. People will speak about it. My parents will be happy. Validation from your internal family to your external society. So then it just comes down to that validation aspect also. So wanting that perfectionism is also an addiction, is also a chase
Yeah.
at the end of it, right? And I also believe that people will not strive for perfectionism if they have happiness. Somewhere when there is lack of happiness and lack of love, that's when they strive for perfectionism. So it does kind of overlap with
It's a cycle.
what your
It's
upbringing.
connected.
It's a childhood trauma
It's
at some.
yeah, yeah, it is. But that being said, I kind of I try and stray away from the word happiness a lot these
Okay.
days, just because I feel like people see it more as a state and not as a trait.
Tell me more.
So I feel like it's not really this goal that we have to get to, right?
Happiness is
Yeah,
not
happiness in
hmm.
itself isn't the goal. It can be a byproduct, but not the goal, right? So while doing something I can feel happy. That's
Hmm.
not the only reason I'm doing it, right? But it's
Hmm.
it's a byproduct of that, and I think we should just see it as a byproduct, not as the goal. If we stop seeing it as the goal, then we might be actually ironically happier, right?
That's true. So I have another take on happiness as well. Um that happiness is, I mean, it is a byproduct for sure, but happiness is first taught to you when you're a child. Like, and I'm literally saying like toddler
Yeah.
age. So you're an infant, you're a child, you're looking at an apple and laughing. Like that is happiness. You learn happiness and you learn that feeling, and as you said, it stays in the body. So that feeling stays, you know what that feeling is. And If by chance you've had a rough childhood and you've not experienced happiness growing up, then no matter what you do, you're always going to chase
Yeah.
happiness as that state of being
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
destination.
Yeah.
You're not going to enjoy it as a byproduct of any other path that you pick.
Yeah.
Like you could pick the most toughest path of life, but you'll still be happy because of the smaller things or just generally with yourself. Because as you said, it is a byproduct.
I also feel like the equilibrium for happiness is different for so many people.
Hmm.
So it's like a hedonic treadmill of happiness. Like you think that this job will make me happy, and this is also where perfectionism ties into it. This when I get a car, it'll make me happy. When I get a promotion, it'll make me happy. When I get married, it'll make me happy. Right? When I get so and so level of clients, it will make me happy. But when you actually achieve that, it's still not there. Then you're chasing the next thing. You're not even allowing yourself to stay in that
Yeah, so
and
it's
soak it
about
in.
the destination and not the journey, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you're also at the destination only for a short amount of time. You're you're doing the journey for
Much longer.
longer.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to be happy for those 3 years that it took you to achieve that, then those 2 3 months that you're in that space, you're not going to learn suddenly magically how to be
Absolutely.
happy.
And this is actually why taking a holiday for too long will never feel good.
Interesting.
Because that happiness will not, eventually you'll hit a point where you're like, I'm not feeling happy anymore. I need the next best thing. So something
Yeah.
actually my father does, and this is what I've learned from him, is he puts a few belongings of his that he really values and loves a lot away for a few months
Oh.
and then brings them back out of the wardrobe because that then resets his equilibrium in a way. And I thought that's such a cool exercise to do to reset your happiness meter.
So basically, because you miss it, you and then you want it back, and then
You
when you,
value it.
yeah, and when you get it back, you feel that sense of
Yeah.
happiness. Oh my God, that's so interesting.
So it resets your equilibrium versus just getting more and more and more and more things
Like Amazon
like
will.
Amazon and online shopping.
Okay, can we talk about online
Yeah.
shopping addiction?
Started with COVID for me at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That was another thing that picked up a lot during COVID. Like,
It's that gratification. I don't even think it's about the shopping as much as it is about like instantly getting something. So even like I mean this is very interesting is like when I was studying there were so many studies that showed us that we that you know how we have different shipping options, right? So there
hmm.
were participants that were chosen from the Asian right, the continents and the American continents, and the American counterparts tended to choose the 1 day or 2 day options much more than the Asian counterparts. So it's also a culture thing
So we
sometimes.
chose like
We
free
chose
delivery.
we chose free delivery if it's after 10 days also.
Hmm.
Right? So that's
Interesting.
the difference. Even it's culturally also very different. But now, because we are also moving towards that culture a little more and the world is merging so much, that I feel like if you did that experiment again, it would maybe be we'd all choose 2 day shipping.
That's true. So instant gratification was one thing. And for me, what I realized was the fact that I can do it. So there's a power in the fact that,
There's control.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can afford this. Even though this is a meaningless purchase, I still want it. I can get it. And that sense of power and control made me feel good about myself. And that's what I was constantly chasing in
Yeah.
COVID. So it wasn't that, oh, like I saw a product or I got it really quickly. I think it was just maybe in a way that now obviously I tend to look at it in a positive way. It was just that, good you've reached this point in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But a lot of people could have taken it very negatively as well,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So it's that sense of power and control over, yeah, I can do this.
And in COVID, we didn't have control. So that's the biggest thing
Yeah,
that we wanted.
somewhere we needed some base. And also I think the beginning of COVID we weren't even allowed to like order online.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it
Everything had to be sanitized and
Yeah.
yeah.
Essential orders were not there. And the moment it did pick up, I think that's when everyone went crazy, like
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
gym equipments and home
Where
gyms.
are all those things now?
Yeah.
Giving them all away slowly.
Yeah, we're all like selling most
Yeah.
of it at this point. You're right. But yeah, we're quite wasteful that way.
We are.
Yeah. And talking about wasteful, I've also realized that people are very comfortable buying things on Amazon, going out for dinners and brunches and holidays, but they won't invest and spend that same money for therapy.
Absolutely. Couldn't have put it better. That's the struggle I go through as a therapist.
Yeah. So there is a stigma. So I was in the States earlier this year, and someone asked me, because they knew I'm from the mental health field, and she was just like, so is there a stigma in India around therapy? And I started off the answer saying no. It's like, no, there isn't a
That's your
stigma.
first, like, oh, you want to
Yeah,
protect yourself.
exactly. I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
no. And every sentence after that, I was like, but
It's
this,
contradicting.
but
Yeah.
that, but. And then I was like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to change my answer. Yes, there is still a stigma around therapy. And that's when I realized that, I mean, I always knew it, but it was so much more ingrained that in the West, they're not convincing people why you need to come in for therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
They are just selling who they are. Like, okay, this is my degree, this is what I focus on, this is what these are my expertise. So you can choose. Here, we're first convincing them,
That's half our job, I
yeah,
would say. Yeah.
why is therapy good? Why is therapy expensive in a certain way, which is not really that expensive compared to the other luxuries? It's not like why is it expensive, and then why you should choose us. So we are literally like
We're
passing.
doing a lot of jobs at one time, I think, as therapists, as being in the helping profession. I think half the job is just convincing that it's okay to seek help because society has conditioned us otherwise. So first you have to kind of unfix that. You have to decode that and like really change that conditioning, and then psychoeducation becomes a huge part of it, which is where we're explaining to people what this could be. But okay, but what diagnosis do I have? When will I be done? It doesn't work like that, right? And that's the difference
Yeah.
between even though I like comparing it to the medical model to show people that, see, if you had diabetes you'd be on an insulin shot, right? And in the same way, if you have depression you need an antidepressant. But my only problem with the medical model is that there is a fix at the end of it,
Hmm.
whereas I don't like glorifying a timeline and a fix to things like therapy. Of course I understand the affordability aspect of it, and my goal as a therapist is always to provide people with tools that they can use far after. So it's like building your own first aid kit in
Yeah,
some sense, right?
exactly.
Uh, I forgot what you asked. Completely gone off topic now.
No, no. So basically, I was just like, is it so? It's firstly, it's so expensive. It's the stigma. And then it's also our job not only to um, tell the client why they should be coming to us, but it's also educating them about therapy. And this is something that even I face. So I personally have been in therapy for 14 years now. Um, I will never say I'm not in therapy. I might go like once in 2 months now if I need it,
Yeah.
or maybe once a month. But there'd be a phase that I go like 4 times a month, or I go every week, or whatever. I mean, it's still continuing. So it's like a check in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like you're never ever going to go to a doctor. You're never going to do a
Yeah.
yearly
Yeah.
checkup,
Yeah.
right? And I do understand that sometimes people have come across really bad therapists and they feel like they've gotten.
That's also part of it, is undoing those bad experiences.
Yeah. So I always tell them that you can go to one bad gym and you can have one bad personal trainer, but you're not going to give up on the whole concept of physical health.
That's a very interesting take on it,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
So you can have like one bad experience with a therapist, or you could not get along with someone's modalities, but you can't just be like, oh, mental health is not for me, therapy is not for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. You can't
Like,
diss the entire field.
yeah, there's no
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
that you can do that. Yeah, and you know what? That bad gym or that bad personal trainer works for someone else.
Yeah.
It just didn't work for you.
Therapy is all about fit. Coaching and therapy, these both are all about the right fit. It's and whenever I do an intake session, I tell my clients, consider this like a first date.
Okay, explain intake.
So sorry for right.
It's
So
okay.
used to using it. So intake is when I get my clients' initial details in.
Hmm.
So what concern they bring to therapy, what their background is, concerns like how has your childhood been, right? What is your past relationship history, and how do they contribute to the challenges you're going through currently, so that you get sort of a holistic picture of it. How's your food, how's your sleep, so you get a holistic picture before you actually deep dive into then
Hmm.
understanding them better,
Yeah.
right? And setting goals. as you go ahead. So I always tell them that at the end of the session, you get to decide whether this is the right fit for you,
Hmm.
right? And I also emphasize that transparency at any point in the process, so that you can tell me, hey, this is not working for me because, and either then I can try and change my approach to suit your approach better, or if we're just not a good fit, I will refer you out to someone, right?
100%, 100%. So for me, I literally tell people that when we are doing our discovery call, which is like your intake, is what I call it, we need to make sure that this works for both of us. This is for you to decide if you want to work with me, and for me to decide if I want to take
Yeah,
this
yeah.
case up. And if I can't, I will
But
definitely
there's
refer
so
you.
much guilt associated with that, is what I've seen, is when I cannot. Of course, if it's out of my scope of competence, it's easier to do.
Yeah,
But if I feel like they're saying something that's not a good fit for my views,
yeah,
which happens once in a while, the guilt of turning away someone is huge,
yeah.
because you know that that effort is taken to make that first call.
I fully get it. I've had clients that said that I am coming to you because my wife has forced me to come to you. So
Yeah,
at this point, I'm just like, I'm sorry, I
yeah.
can't, because until you don't want to make that change,
No,
until you don't
yeah,
believe in this process, it's not going to work. And you're not going to see any change, and it's just going to be very irritating.
yeah.
This whole process is going to be very
The
irritating.
willingness and ability, the first two things. And you cannot convince a person, you cannot get someone to do something, it's impossible,
It's
right?
impossible. So I'm just like, no, at that point, that's when I have to like reject the client, if or like tell them to go somewhere else. It's like, this is not for me. I can't take this case up.
It's outside my scope, right?
Yeah,
And I wouldn't be doing ethical justice to you as well taking it on. Yeah.
100%,
And I feel
100%.
like one thing interesting about our helping field is it's not very competitive, in the sense that, at least I have not felt that, in the sense that I will happily refer you to someone else because I know it's just not a good fit. Right, so
Hmm.
there's not that competition of, oh, this one is doing better, this one is earning. And that's one of the things I like about our field, that as helpers, maybe we have that that inner voice of empathy as well, where we want to help other people in our field also out.
Exactly. The number of people who have referred clients to me and the number of clients I've
Yeah.
referred to people, and there's no like jealousy of like, oh, they'll make more money off him. And as you
Nothing.
said, it's
Yeah.
a fit. It has to work. It has to work. And sometimes it can work for like 4 years with you. And then eventually they need to find someone
Yeah.
else. They have to move on. Like, I've been in therapy for 14 years. I've never had the same therapist
Yeah.
for 14
And it's
years.
it's healthy to have different approaches to the same problem or the
Yeah.
same challenge.
Yeah.
So that also works
Because
sometimes.
you're also growing now you've assumed, you've understood what like feeling your feeling is, but maybe now you need a little bit more somatic help.
Yeah.
Sometimes
And
you
there's so
need.
many types of therapy. At some point in my life, I need art therapy. At some
Yeah.
point, I need drama therapy. At some point, I need cognitive behavioral therapy. Who knows?
That's true, that's true. And something that we said earlier in this session is that, women are more like, women do this more. We have the soft skills, we um are the helpers, we are always making sure that everyone is comfortable, everyone is okay.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And this is something that has like, especially with us, with me, like I'm being a millennial kid, it has really like, we've been brought up with this narrative, we've been brought up with this, figure out how you are going to be good. Even when you do something nice as a child, so I was like, good girl, good girl, good girl. And like, we're always told to be so amazing, so poised, like people should say that you have a good girl, and everyone in the room should be very comfortable and happy with you, because you have served them, you have
Yeah.
made them happy. No one should have a problem with you, because anyways, having a girl is already such a burden as a society, in society. Having a boy, you get the pass, it's an easy pass, but having a girl already is a burden. Then you have to make sure that that girl is a good girl, and then you have to make sure that girl is serving everyone and making everyone happy. And like, even seeing like the recent news, it's so scary to see that how we have been grooming our girls to a point where they're not able to say no in some cases, and in some cases where they do say no and they do stand up for
It
for
means
them,
nothing.
because then a guy doesn't
Yeah.
listen.
No.
And this can happen like in the same household. So
Absolutely.
how does the good girl syndrome really play out in therapy and play out in this world right now?
So many ways. People pleasing, for one, right? There is so much of an ability to uh, say yes to everyone because then I won't be liked. And as women, I think we grew up with a lot of external validation and the
Mm.
need for it. And so because of that, we are craving it so much that we try and overcompensate. Also, we have lower self-esteem, right? Even studies and statistics show that we have lower self-esteem than men do.
Yeah.
And I think when we have a lower self-esteem, you try and overcompensate by people pleasing, right?
Yeah,
And so
that's
that tends to happen, and then we tend to say yes to everything, we go with everything. We're conflict avoidant because our voices might not be heard. um,
mm,
you know we might be seen as sensitive, we might be seen as not logical, or sometimes in certain households that you wouldn't think even, right? Our decisions are not taken seriously, or our voice in a decision is not taken seriously if it comes to a matter that we they don't think we're good at, right? So see, if there's a household task, then maybe they'll take your opinion on it, right?
but
In
if
some
it's
houses,
finance,
because it's, but if it's finance or business, then they may not. I'm lucky to grow enough in a household where that's not the case
yeah.
today, but I know there's a lot of people who have that in their households, or even when they get married, they might have that in their households where, like, are you now allowed to work the same hours that you, and it's okay to take that decision as long as you take it yourself. But when it's imposed on you, then it's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's when you feel helpless, right?
Yeah.
And as you said, once the self-esteem goes down, you're not able to like put up boundaries. And then you don't know if these boundaries are right or wrong.
Yeah.
So you're kind of doubting those boundaries at the end of the day. And if you are doubting your own boundaries, that's when you start to like accept bad behavior, if I could say it in those
Yeah.
crass words. Like we'll accept someone in our own house putting us down, physically, emotionally, financially, in any way. Like domestic violence has started increasing in such cases where the woman is controlled. And again, we normalize these things. Even if the girl has gone out and asked for help, asked her parents, asked her friends or her in
In
laws.
some cases, they won't take them back either. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they've literally like, they either don't help, they don't support, because the book looks great outside, no? The cover looks amazing. It
Mm.
doesn't matter what you're saying. So when we start to ignore all these signs of the smaller kind of abuse, and I really don't mean like, lifting my hand and slapping someone, just like putting someone down, reading the red
It's
flags.
microaggressions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Even like, oh, when they crack a joke, when they say something and be like, oh, it was just a joke. It's not just a joke.
Yeah.
You passed a really bad comment, right? So it starts from there. It starts with like domestic violence, and then it goes into things that we're just now facing, like in Kolkata. It's really hard for women.
Absolutely.
And this all starts with being a good girl,
Yeah.
constantly telling them to be a good girl. It's really hard for women, right, in today's day and age. Hopefully, we are also
We're on
seeing
our
change.
way. I mean, I was really impressed with the way the response to the case was.
True.
I think it was bigger than anything we've ever seen as a country. So it's definitely in the right direction, if anything. And I feel like that's because the awareness is increasing. People are slowly speaking up. And I think the population is so young, and our generation understands, is aware of boundaries a little better than the previous generation.
100%. Like, I know when I heard the Nirbhaya case 12 years ago, it was a whole different aspect there. There was still anger. Now it was more sadness.
Yeah.
Like, how can this still be existing? Like, what the hell is
But
happening?
I think that's also the thing, right? With women,
Hmm.
especially, is that when we feel angry, it's easier for us to feel sad than angry. Because anger is not really seen as a womanly thing,
Hmm.
and sadness is not seen as a manly thing. So in my clients also, I see that where men will come in with there's anger challenges, right? it seems like there's an anger challenge, but below that it's sadness of not being a good enough son, of not earning enough income, of not supporting parents, of all these things that they've internalized, right? That comes out as anger because anger is acceptable for men, but for women anger is really not acceptable. Sadness is more acceptable. So it's the same issue, it's just packaged differently, I
Yeah,
would
that's
say.
so true.
Mm.
And talking about men having that and internalizing it, um, with men's mental health in that aspect, a lot of men, and I'm not saying every man,
Of course.
but a lot of men have been brought up with the mentality that you are being brought up to provide, right? So you are now going to take care of your parents when they get old. You do have to have a family and have children.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and they they don't realize that they are working as just machines, but they do have feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
So they don't acknowledge it. And there is like a higher rate of heart attacks and suicide in men.
Absolutely underreported.
Underreported.
Very
100%.
underreported. Yeah.
I mean, even rape was underreported at that point, but like, yeah, completely underreported. But there's a very high amount of mental health issues with men which they don't want to acknowledge. Why do you think that they shy away from that so much?
It is conditioning to a large extent. It's a lot of internalizing. It's years of internalizing. Like even growing up, boys are told to not show their feelings, to not cry, right? Like you were saying to me earlier today, play with things that are like even the toys, right? Like
Hmm.
play with these cars, play with guns, don't play with dolls. I think it's even as small as that. It's such a tiny thing, but it shows that you cannot express, because see, play is a way of expressing feelings, right? So what are we expressing when we're playing with dolls? We're expressing emotion, right? So we are expressing that. We're expressing happiness, love, sadness, right? If the my baby's not waking up, I'm feeling sad. My baby's tummy's hurting, I'm feeling sad. And what our men taught, okay, race with these cars now. Go shoot these people in this video game, right? See, again, it's that anger and sadness. That divide is created so early that
Hmm.
you internalize it over time, and to mean that I can't show sadness. Another thing is that when we go out as women with our friends, I have noticed this, at least in my friend circles and with my clients as well, we talk about all aspects of our lives, including the sadness that we feel,
Yeah.
including the load that we feel, and that shared experience helps us. Now, that shared experience might not be there in men as much. When people come to me for therapy, sometimes it's the first ever time they've spoken about being sad, or even felt comfortable feeling sad in that room. Because when they go out with their friends, it's not cool enough to talk about feeling sad. You never
Absolutely.
hit up your guy friends being like, bro, I'm having a really bad day, I'm feeling really sad, right? Rarely do you ever hear that happen. So I
It'll
feel like
just be like,
it'll just,
bro, let's meet.
let's meet, let's
Yeah.
get a drink,
Let's get a
right?
drink.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's different ways of socializing that also leads to it, and different amounts of being able to express.
Yeah. Because a lot of men do think that, yes, we have our bros and yes, we have our boys in the boys' club. They'll take care of me. They are not mind readers. They
Yeah.
don't know what's happening in your mind. They don't know the emotion that you are going through. They don't know what you're being sensitive to right now, what's exactly bothering you. So, yes, you can have as many friends as you want and as many siblings and cousins and all that you want. They can be around you, but they will not be able to help you till you don't know how to talk
Express. Yeah.
and
Which is
articulate.
why I said language is the most powerful tool that we have. Mm.
Exactly. It's crazy how um, the importance of just articulating something can change the entire ball game. And you're absolutely right. Like when women go out with women, eventually we are talking about our feelings at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Absolutely.
how the breakup was or how they felt in, when they went on holiday. They're always talking about how they are feeling. And this is something I also find really sweet or like bizarre, like when a woman asks another woman how you're feeling, they actually say
Yeah.
how they're
Yeah.
feeling.
No, how you really feeling, right?
Yeah,
That's always my follow up. How you really
really
feeling?
feeling.
Yeah.
But if a man says, "How are you?" it's just
So
that their
it's all good.
condition, yeah,
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah.
Like they could have had a death in their
And
family.
they'll say it's all good. Yeah. But then that's also, I mean, I don't know, at least I have tended to be sometimes by default the person that my guy friends go to for to I'm not just because I'm in this field, but as just as being a woman, because they know that their feelings might be hurt there.
Hmm.
So that's interesting to see also.
Yeah, but it also comes down to like a woman might understand that I'm upset or depressed or sad.
We know emotions.
Exactly. Because also, when you tell someone else now, uh, even your parents or whoever, if you say that I'm sad, the first few things, maybe the first one or the second one will be like, let it go, move on. It's very easy to tell a guy or tell another person, just let it be. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Tomorrow you'll forget about it. So this is when we start like pushing under everything under the rug, right?
Yeah.
And eventually it builds to a certain point that even a draft of wind will throw all our problems down on us. And then we'll be like, why me?
Yeah.
What did I do?
Yeah.
But you did.
Yeah.
You didn't acknowledge all
Yeah.
these things for years. So
You
you
built
did.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you built it
And
up.
they're not even to blame, because it's a hard place to be.
Yeah,
Genuinely, it
it
is. It's a
is.
very challenging place to
It
be.
is. It is. I mean, I'm also really happy that men are getting help. And um, I do see that when a man does decide to get help, it's like, the blinders are on. It's at one track now. They'll do everything and anything to.
And they'll spot it in their other friends as well. So I
Yeah.
have had, on the positive side of things, I've had a lot of male clients come to me saying, I think this guy needs you and I'm going to refer you out. Can you
Mm.
please just text him in case he doesn't reach out? And I have done that. And then I've got a really positive response. So
Oh.
that through word of mouth, that spreads, and that's so pleasant to see. And I would actually say that 70% of my client list is men, which is just so reassuring. And I would never have expected that.
You're not wrong. I have like about 50% of my client list which are men, and I can guarantee and tell. And some of them are in their 50s
Yeah,
and
yeah.
almost touching 60s. So I can guarantee and tell you that when a man decides to change, he will do everything he can.
When a human decides to change, it's the willingness and ability. It's two things. Once you have this, then you'll be open to receiving that.
Exactly. Talking about the willingness and ability, um, we always do what we have been taught to do, right? So even when we are at home, we behave the same way outside the way our parents have behaved with us, right? So the way they have taught us to love, we go outside and love the same way,
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
way they have taught or they have shown hatred towards us or abuse towards us or love, hate, whatever emotion, we go and show a version of that outside. I do see a very high amount of, especially women being attracted to men who are probably not the best partners for
Hmm.
them. It could be
Yeah.
definitely an anxious attachment, but I don't want to use such a big word because not everybody understands it.
Yeah, yeah.
But like there is that emotional attachment to, let's just use the word, the wrong person in this
In this
specific,
scenario.
yeah, in this
Yeah.
scenario. And it's increasing. Maybe it's increasing now because we are more aware of it and we can see it more. Maybe it was always there, but there are so much of this being attracted to the wrong person for you in that moment or in that phase of life. And how do you get such cases? How do
I think I
people
get a
handle?
lot. Yes, a lot of women who are attracted to emotionally unavailable partners. Usually, it stems from, you're right, the context of it tends to be the way you've interacted with your parents, which sets the tone for
Hmm.
how you expect, because your parents are the first people that you love, right? That are your caretakers. That sets the blueprint for how you look at the world and look at yourself and look at how the world looks at you, right? So if I'm told at home that you're so there's also varying levels of it, which is why you can't label it, right? Because that too much love also tends to go against you to expect too much from someone who you tend to then look out for or date. and too little of it can also, it's like the plant thing, right? Too little, too much. It's about being just good enough in some
Yeah.
sense as a parent, which is challenging to do.
Yeah.
But it sets sort of a blueprint to say that I will accept this in the outside world because this is all I'm worth, right?
Yeah.
Or um, this is the template I've grown up with, so this is what I will expect. But I've also seen clients who try to overcompensate. So when they've
Hmm.
not gotten that love from their parents, they try to look for it desperately in a partner. And that's
Yeah.
also an anxious style of some kind.
Yeah.
So I do see a lot of clients with this attachment style. Yes, I do. There's a lot of this thing of, and this emotionally available partners being attractive is such a cultural phenomenon, right? That, this whole red flag thing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so it's interesting, and I feel like those people themselves have this anxious attachment, avoidant attachment style that they've built through their childhood, which has never been checked.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Because also it was normalized, no, that um the husband or the father goes out, he earns the money, he comes back, so he is not present and he's not been there for the children. So and now they want some love, the children want some love from the father, and then they'll give them that little
Yeah.
bit. And now obviously when they go out there, they that's their only replica, right, of a man.
Yeah.
So as you said, it can go in either direction, either you want it the same way or like
Completely
completely
different.
opposite.
Yeah.
And that also, like, literally the way you treat your children is the way the
The
they'll get
world. Yeah.
treated. Yeah, the world will treat them the same way. So if you don't treat them well, the next person can come and give them like too bit of attention, like just two lines they'll throw here and there,
And
and
it'll be enough.
it'll be
But it's a
enough.
very tricky balance. I will say
Yeah.
that. I think it's about being good enough. So being showing them the mirror where it's
Hmm.
necessary.
The children show.
The children showing the parents the mirror, but also the parents building a environment comfortable enough to show that mirror, right? That has to be
Hmm.
there. Because every time they show you the mirror, if you're going to shout at them when they're kids, they sort of get programmed to think that I can't bring this up. Then that builds into conflict avoidance,
So
right?
it's not safe enough for me to talk about
Yeah.
my feelings in this house, and then suddenly years later, once they become adults, they want them to feel safe to like tell them all their problems in their marriages and all.
Yeah.
Like it's not
That's
going
not
to
going to
sad.
happen.
It's
Yeah.
not going to build that
Yeah.
way. If you've not made a safe and comfortable house for your child to tell you what's bothering them, they're not going to say it.
It's all about emotional needs and how they're met, I feel.
Yeah, that is true. And it's about also, so now we have conscious parenting, right? That's coming into the picture. With conscious parenting, they are they are like telling the parents to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So, it's like humanizing them.
Yeah.
Humanizing them to a point where, suddenly once the first mistake a parent makes, they don't just fall down from the
And
pedestal.
that's the thing, is that we tend to see those, that seeing a mistake or admitting a mistake makes us a bad parent. And showing your vulnerability to your child makes you a bad parent. Where that's not true. That's not going to make them respect you less.
Hmm.
Maybe it'll make them respect you more for admitting it. And those people go on to be great leaders in life because they've been shown that it's okay to role model making mistakes, and I can do that as a leader.
Yeah, and just normalizing even mistakes, but even the emotions around it, right? So many people have not seen their fathers cry,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like it's something like, oh my god, I've never seen my father cry. That means I can never cry. My son can never see me cry. It's like just normalizing emotions. You can have a bad day, you can have made a mistake, and you can cry, and
Yeah.
that's fully okay. So once you start to humanize, once parents start to humanize themselves, I think that's what has been changing the dynamic.
I also feel like it's intergenerational trauma. So when you go through something in your childhood that you don't resolve, it'll keep getting passed on until you take some step to change
Hmm.
that for yourself, right? So that's why seeking help is so important even before you become a parent, so that you're aware of your biases, you're aware of what you could potentially pass on even subconsciously.
Oh, absolutely. Like generational trauma is like a label maker,
Yeah.
right? You're just like, you just put this label on it and just put it into an archive, give the same file to your
Yeah, give the same file.
daughter, give
Yeah.
the same file
Here,
to her.
you deal with it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally like, I always feel like it's like a label
But it's
maker.
so powerful for that one person to break that cycle, because when that person breaks that cycle, it definitely won't continue on, or there's very low chances of it continuing on.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much pressure on that one person, and they feel so alienated, right?
Yeah,
Because
they feel it's isolation. And listen, to a certain point, then to survive in your family, if you're living with them,
hmm,
of course it becomes a coping skill and a survival skill to be a certain way. So it
exactly.
takes a lot of courage, and a lot of people that I have seen have gone outside their home. Once they've gone to college, then they've broken that pattern because now they're living away from home. So that has also helped.
Exactly. Because you can't make a complete change or expect something to change
While you're
completely.
in the system.
Yeah, exactly. So even if someone has hurt you and they're in your family, it's easier said than done that, okay, cut off and all. And somewhere I feel like in our culture, especially in the Indian culture, it's not so easy to just cut off,
Yeah.
especially if they're in your family and in the immediate setting.
And there may be a part of you that still loves that person a lot as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a certain thing that doesn't align. But if that certain thing is your non negotiable, then somewhere
Yeah.
you'd have to take that decision. And it's really hard for people to make change. And it's really hard for us as well to see people go through it and then fail sometimes and then go through it and fail
Yeah.
sometimes. So it's like, oh, like we're completely like rooting
No,
for you at some
but
point.
it's also systemic to the point that sometimes you're swimming against the tide as a helper, right? Because you just can't do anything about systemic issues
Yeah.
besides, like, I feel like the future of helpers is to also become policymakers at some point.
At some point,
Yeah,
at some
yeah.
point. Yeah, you're not wrong. But yeah, like it was, it's such a, it's so fulfilling at some point when you do this kind of work and you see, I don't know, reward is maybe the right word or the wrong word here, but you see people actually change.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. When you see change, and a lot of people say that, oh my god, y'all are doing such a great job, but I'm just like, they are the strong ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fact that you have been abused by someone, you've decided to move out of
You've
that
broken a
house
pattern, which is the most powerful thing someone can do.
and saved money
Yeah.
and decided to come for therapy and work on
Yeah.
yourself, you are much better than me at this
Yeah.
point.
I'm
Like,
just giving you the toolkit, you're using it.
you are using it, you are
Yeah.
doing everything at this point. So it's like I feel so much more grateful to have those clients in my life,
Absolutely.
right? And change is something that we all need to like build slowly. It's a chain reaction, I guess.
No, and I feel like being in the helping profession, at least being a therapist, makes me feel like I'm being a better human being.
Yeah, I heard this quote somewhere where it's like, if someone has like taken a better breath on earth because of you, then probably your purpose is done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a beautiful note to close this on, because we have spoken for a while and I'm definitely calling you again. We
Of
have a lot,
course, 100%.
we have a lot more to catch up
We
and
do. We
talk
do.
about. But thank you so much for sharing all your interests. It was so interesting to hear so many concepts, and I have so much more to like understand and unfix and
Yeah, yeah.
decode
And decode.
from this. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you for like educating our
Thank you
listeners.
for being here. Thank you for
Thank
letting me be
you.
here.
All right. Bye.